The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Mr. Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Black. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblywoman Martinez. Assemblyman Matthews. Assemblyman MacArthur. Assemblywoman Thomas. Assemblywoman Torres. Chair Flores.
Present, and please let the record reflect Assemblywoman Duran is present. All members are present, and we have a quorum. Good morning, members, and welcome to our very first meeting here in our committee room for the session. I just wanted to give some quick updates as to things are going to be slightly different now as we've gotten accustomed to doing everything on Zoom. For the members, first I'd like to point out the 4 buttons that are sitting directly in front of you. You'll see speak, yay, nay, mic. The only button we'll be using is mic. Each and after every time you want to ask a question or you're called on, just please make sure you turn on your microphone similar to what you would do on the floor. And then please make sure you turn it off after your question is asked. If you have a follow-up, you'll just turn the mic button right back on and you'll ask for a follow-up. If you have any questions, just feel free to turn around and or look to your left or right and let the vice chair, myself, or Mr. McDonald, who are here, that you have a question, we'll make sure that we put you in the queue for lines of questions. We want to remind you that because we are doing the live meetings now, there is no necessity for any of you to log in to the live stream, the Zoom. We don't need you to be logged in twice, right? So if you're here in the room, that's the equivalent of you having turned on your Zoom, so no need to turn on your camera at that point. Members of the public, for those of you who are joining us today and you are interested in visiting the building now that we are partially reopened, as you'll see, we have numerous safety precautions that we've gone above and beyond. Our staff has done a phenomenal job in ensuring our safety and your safety should you wish to visit us. You can always reach out to our committee manager and or staff here at the building, and they can explain the process. I'm not going to go through the process for you to visit the room, but you can reach out to them and they can break that down for you so that you can join us here should you wish to do that. We're going to continue doing the live Zoom videos that everybody's gotten accustomed to doing, and you can log in and participate remotely as we've done throughout the session up to this point. And that's obviously the safest and easiest thing to do, so we encourage people to continue to do that. And with that, we have on the agenda 2 items. I want to remind everybody also, just as always, who's following us virtually, you'll notice that sometimes we're looking down, we're looking directly at our computer. That's not a sign of disrespect, that's just that they're looking at the materials in front of them. Often, a lot of folk just prefer to do everything electronically. And we also, because we're partially opened, we're going to have some people who come before us and then others who will decide to do it all via Zoom. Again, we'll get used to that rhythm and we'll make it work and improve as we go along. So with that, members, we have 2 items on the agenda, as I previously indicated. We have Senate Bill 28 and Senate Bill 47. We'll take them in that order. And at this time, we'll go and open up the hearing on Senate Bill 28. Good morning, sir. We can see you whenever you're ready.
Hey, good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Remus, State Judge Advocate for the Nevada National Guard. I'm here today to provide testimony and to answer questions regarding Senate Bill 28 from the Office of the Military. With me is Miss Nikki Randall, the Joint Forces Headquarters Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. Our goal is to provide some background on the Nevada National Guard, discuss the background and context for the proposed revision, and outline why this revision is in the best interest of the state, the Nevada National Guard, and its service members. The Nevada National Guard supports a dual-hatted mission and answers the nation's call for overseas contingency operations, as well as domestic response assistance within the United States for both the federal government and the state of Nevada. Guardsmen can be called at a moment's notice by the governor of Nevada or activated into a federal status. Members of the Guard commit to military training 1 weekend a month and 15 days each year in their respective military occupations and career fields. When we are activated into federal service, Guardsmen will often deploy for periods ranging from several months to a year or longer. When activated by the state of Nevada, the lengths vary depending on the incident and situation. The Nevada National Guard includes roughly 4,000 uniformed personnel, with the Army component being larger than the air component. During the past year, the Nevada National Guard has been deployed overseas to multiple locations for its federal mission, has assisted and continues to provide significant assistance to the state for COVID response, supported local law enforcement during the civil unrest events of last summer, and sent troops to Washington, D.C. to support the security mission for the presidential inauguration. Senate Bill 28 amends a section of the Nevada revised statutes to modify provisions of our Military Justice Code, specifically concerning the punitive provisions of the state Military Justice Code. Violations of the punitive provisions can subject service members to varying degrees of discipline. The purpose of the modifications being proposed here are to strengthen the Nevada National Guard's efforts to support the Adjutant General's goal to eliminate sexual harassment and sexual assault in the Nevada National Guard. One of the main priorities for Major General Barry is to ensure that all service members in the Nevada National Guard are treated with dignity and respect. Sexual harassment is clearly contrary to that goal and is not tolerated in the Nevada National Guard. At the present time, sexual harassment violations are generally disciplined under NRS 412.563, disorders and neglect prejudicing good order and discipline. This is what we call our general article that is used when a specific punitive provision does not cover misconduct. Misconduct covered under the general article is often not punished as severely when compared to a punitive provision. And by adding a specific punitive provision for sexual harassment, commanders have a more effective tool for disciplining a service member who sexually harasses another member. This addition of a punitive provision makes it absolutely clear that violations of sexual harassment will be punished under the Military Justice Code. The second part of our proposed amendment will align our state military justice code with Department of Defense policy, mainly DoD Directive 6495.01. This alignment helps in several ways. First, these amendments provide more clarity as to the definition of sexual assault. In doing so, the legal analysis for determining whether sexual assault has occurred is simplified. Second, these amendments also allow law enforcement agencies and the National Guard Bureau's Office of Complex Investigations to determine whether a sexual assault has occurred as defined by the Department of Defense, as opposed to only looking at Nevada criminal statutes. It is important that the agencies that conduct sexual assault investigations on our behalf are using the correct military legal standard to allow us to pursue disciplinary action. So in conclusion, Senate Bill 28 will better facilitate good order and discipline in the Nevada National Guard while promoting several of the Adjutant General's command priorities. It is in the best interest of the state to adopt this bill into law and help the Nevada National Guard continue to build a safe environment for our soldiers and airmen that is free of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Thank you for your consideration of this bill and your support of the state's military. With the chair's permission, I would now like Ms. Randall to say a few words.
And thank you for your service and joining us. Good morning.
Thanks.
Good morning. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Karen Nicole Randall, or Nikki Randall. I'm a captain and full-time employee for the Nevada National Guard. I serve as the State Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, or SARC, and I'm responsible for developing and managing the State Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. I also serve on the National Guard Bureau's Sexual Assault Prevention Task Force. The goals of that task force are to identify areas where we can focus our prevention efforts, and then to identify prevention tools we can adopt or create to address those specific areas. Over the last year, the Nevada National Guard has seen a significant improvement in the implementation of our equal opportunity and sexual assault prevention and response programs addressing sexual harassment and sexual assault in the Nevada's military population. Both programs have conducted significant awareness campaigns to ensure that all military and civilian employees know the definitions of sexual harassment and sexual assault and understand their options to report these behaviors. These efforts have also resulted in an increased rate of reporting. Major General Barry has made it clear to all members of the organization that these behaviors will not be tolerated and that he will hold each individual accountable when an investigation reveals they are guilty of these offenses. The proposed revisions strengthens these efforts. These issues are not specific to the Nevada National Guard and are part of the larger conversation about making the military a safe place for all service members, regardless of rank, gender, sexual orientation, or race. The revision to the NRS 412 to include sexual harassment addresses the statistics presented in the 2019 DoD Annual Report on Sexual Assault in the Military, which shows that as many as 50% of reported sexual assaults in the military were preceded by sexual harassing behavior. This inclusion recognizes that the only way to eliminate sexual assault is by first intervening in and ending sexual harassing behavior. The revisions to NRS 412 definitions of consent and sexual contact provide consistency between the Nevada definitions, Uniform Code of Military Justice of the United States, and the United States Department of Defense, and reduce confusion between the federal and state definitions. Thank you for your consideration of this bill and for your support of the state's military. We are both standing by for your questions.
And thank you again for the presentation and to both of you for your service. I'm sure the members are very proud to have you presenting before us. We do have some questions for you, and we'll start off with Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your service, Lieutenant Colonel Remus and Captain Randall. My question has to do with Section 1, lines 9, basically of the new language, when it has to do with non-judicial punishment. Looking through the information for 412, it often talks about the court-martialing, so I understand that part. But what exactly does the non-judicial punishment entail?
Okay, ma'am. Non-judicial punishment is administrative action that we take against soldiers. I guess I would explain it as one step below a court-martial. In a non-judicial punishment hearing, a soldier or an airman is presented with charges which are violations of NRS 412 punitive provisions and a proposed punishment. Then the airman or soldier is given a chance to speak to an attorney and then come back to his second reading to make his or her case as to why he or she should not be punished as part of non-judicial punishment. The NRS also specifies under 412 the different punishments that are available as part of non-judicial punishment.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we have Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you, Colonel Remus and Captain Rendell, for your service. I appreciate your presentation. My question is this like double jeopardy? I know that, Captain Rendell, you kind of explained the difference between Uniform Code of Military Justice and Nevada Code of Military Justice. But is this when the punishment is eated out, is this a form of double jeopardy? Thank you.
No, ma'am, it's not. In the National Guard, we have different statuses which subject us to different military codes. If someone's on active duty, they would be subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And when someone is in a National Guard status, they would be subject to NRS 412. So they would not be punished. There are no double jeopardy issues with that. And it's the same way with non-judicial punishment versus a court-martial. It would be one or the other. We wouldn't punish them in two ways.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Madam Vice Chair, do you still have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just a clarifying question. So could they still be subject then to criminal proceedings even if they have dealt with the matter in like a non-judicial punishment if obviously if the event was eligible?
No, ma'am. The way that we
My
investigate
apologies.
sexual assaults in the National
Sorry
Guard.
for cutting you off. If I could just have you state your name for the record after each question, please, just for the sake of helping our secretaries. Thank you.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Remus. Ma'am, the way we investigate sexual assaults in the National Guard, according to National Guard Bureau regulations, is we first send them to civilian law enforcement. If civilian law enforcement investigates and finds that there are no criminal charges, then it is referred back to us. If criminal charges were found during the law enforcement investigation, that would be prosecuted by local authorities, the Washoe County District Attorney, Clark County District Attorney. If there are no criminal charges, but there's still a violation of NRS 412 sexual assault, because there are different standards between the NRS criminal provision for sex assault and the military provision for sexual assault. So once the criminal charges are cleared, then it would come to us for non-judicial punishment.
Thank you. I think that answers my question. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Members, any additional questions? Assemblywoman Dickman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for being here and for your service. I just have a quick question about Section 3, where it defines the circumstances that do not constitute consent. And number 1, I'm not sure what exactly that means. A lack of verbal or physical resistance. Could you kind of give me a little example or something? It's on page 2, line 16 of the bill.
Page 3, I think.
Excuse me, page 3.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Remus. Okay, so ma'am, we use the Department of Defense definitions, and so this is one where you don't consent cannot be implied if someone does not resist in some way. So that would not constitute a consent would not be justified just because someone did not verbally resist or physically resist. Does that help?
It's just a little hard to understand, I guess. Maybe would it be hard to understand for the people involved in an incident?
Lieutenant Colonel Remus again. Ma'am, I think these definitions are clearer than it was before, because the previous version defined everything as what is non-consensual. Where here we try to follow the Department of Defense definition that more soldiers and airmen are familiar with, through things like their basic training, initial entry training, and things like that. So we thought it was clearer to use the Department of Defense definition.
And so in their training, they would be trained regarding
Lieutenant
something like
Remus,
this.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this is Ms. Randall. With that, we do train this. We do include the conversation about what constitutes consent, what doesn't constitute consent in all of our training. We use the DoD definition, the UCMJ definition, and right now we have a separate clause that explains the NRS definition of non-consent. So this makes our training a lot clearer, so there's not that confusion about, well, are we under the DoD definition? Are we under the NRS definition? But we do discuss that when we talk about that particular line, the lack of verbal or physical resistance. So that means the person doesn't have to say no, or they don't have to physically resist or fight the individual for it to be non-consensual. consent is defined, it has to be defined by that person saying yes and agreeing to the conduct at issue.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
And thank you. I believe we have another question from Assemblyman MacArthur, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine was basically the same question, only the question I really have is there going to be a legal problem proving the charges? And so it was really a question for legal, but it was the same question that we just had.
Lieutenant Karimis, sir, this is where we would, rely on our law enforcement investigation partners to help us determine, whether consent occurred or not.
Mr. MacArthur, did you have a follow-up?
No, I was just curious about if this is going to be a legal problem. But it looks like they're going with this anyway, so no further questions.
Understood. Members, any additional questions? Assemblywoman Considine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I may ask a hypothetical situation about this section of the bill. If someone in the guard is pushed up against the wall, groped, kissed, and then the other person walks away, that would fall under this definition of there's a lack of consent because that person did not consent. Is that correct? Am I reading that right? If there expresses a lack of consent through words or conduct, in that situation, that person has not expressed consent, but obviously that is not something that person wanted to happen. Is that a good hypothetical to explain that?
Lieutenant Karimis, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Colonel Ramis, just a quick question. When we are metering out discipline, is there an Article 15 under the Guard?
Lieutenant Karimis, yes, ma'am. We have an Article 15 in NRS 412. That's our non-judicial punishment. Yes, ma'am.
Follow-up, Chair. Is that the greatest punishment, Article 15?
Lieutenant Karimis, no, ma'am. We could go to court-martial. Article 15 is our strongest, internal punishment that we've used since I've been in this position. If an actual sex assault occurred, we could also refer it to the district attorney.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you both again for your presentation. At this time, we'll open up the hearing for those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 28. Broadcast, if we could go to the phone lines, please.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 28, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 362, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, my name is Katie Robbins, Katierobbins, here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada, and we would like to voice our support for SB 28. Our service members should not have to feel that sexual harassment or sexual assault will not be properly punished or taken as seriously as these offenses deserve. Putting an end to sexual harassment will be an important step forward to ending sexual assault, and we applaud the National Guard for bringing this bill and urge the committee's support of SB 28. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Broadcast, next caller wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 28.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 28. Broadcast, please.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 28, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Senate Bill 28.
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 28, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. And if we can go back to our presenters, either one of you, if you'd like to make any closing remarks at this time.
Lieutenant Karimis, Mr. Chair, I have no further remarks. Just thank you for your support of the military.
And thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the presentation. Thank you both again for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. With that, we'll close out the hearing on Senate Bill 28. And next, I believe we'll have our treasurer, Mr. Conine, joining us. Good morning, welcome, and at this time, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 47. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. For the record, I have the pleasure of being Treasurer Zach Conine. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present to you Senate Bill 47. In response to the devastating financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, during the 31st special session, the Nevada Legislature passed Senate Bill 4. SB 4 permitted the State Board of Finance to issue interim debentures if the balance of the state general fund was insufficient to meet future obligations. Provisions of SB 4 are set to expire on June 30th, 2021. Senate Bill 47 makes provisions of SB 4 permanent and slightly modifies the process to ensure greater checks and balances. Upon expiration of the provisions of Senate Bill 4, the state will have no mechanism or ability other than calling the legislature into special session to borrow money in an emergency. Senate Bill 47 puts a permanent tool in Nevada's toolbox to address financial crises, whether caused by severe economic downturn, public health emergencies, or other extreme extenuating circumstances in which the state is unable to pay its bills. Nevada is one of only 4 states with a biennial budget process, which makes it challenging to respond efficiently and adequately to evolving economic conditions. Senate Bill 47 will provide the state with a level of flexibility to ensure that general fund appropriations made by the legislature can be fulfilled in an economic downturn without taking significant losses in the state's investment portfolio. Senate Bill 47, much like Senate Bill 4, permits the State Board of Finance to issue not more than $150 million in interim debentures through the following steps. Step 1, State Treasurer determines that the balance in the general fund is insufficient to meet upcoming obligations. Step 2, the Treasurer notifies the Interim Finance Committee of the amount of insufficiency and transmits a request to allow for the issuance by the State Board of Finance. Step 3, the Interim Finance Committee has 15 days to decide to consider the item, and if approved, delivers a resolution establishing the maximum amount that may be issued. This step was revised on the Senate side with an amendment allowing the Interim Finance Committee greater oversight in the process. In the original bill, if the IFC did not take up the request in 15 days, the request be automatically approved. However, in this updated, amended version, if the IFC does not take the request up within 15 days, the request is not automatically approved, and the State Board of Finance shall not issue the debentures. While it will only be utilized in limited emergency circumstances, we believe Senate Bill 47 is necessary to ensure the state has the tools it needs to respond effectively and efficiently in times of crisis. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Members, at this time, we'll go to questions. We'll start off with Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. A question for you. Does that $150 million count against the constitutional limits regarding limits on the state's bonding limitation, 2% of the assessed value of the state? I believe that's spelled out in Article 9, Section 3 of the Constitution. Thank you.
Treasurer Conine, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblyman. Absolutely. Everything we do is, of course, as you know, and as we always focus on, subject to our constitutional limits. There are 2 things that affect how much money we can borrow in the state. One thing is the bit that you talked to on the constitutional cap, and the other bit is affordability. which is basically how much money the state is able to borrow and pay back at any given time, including existing borrowing and future borrowing. Every 2 years, we put out a debt affordability report, which is a real page turner. I encourage you all to read it, that says how much we can borrow over the next legislative biennium. And that lets the governor put together the CIP and you all to approve it. Now, if we were to use this emergency mechanism in between bienniums and we weren't paying it and we didn't pay it back by the time our next affordability report came out, that would of course decrease the affordability going forward. So this bill does not allow us to borrow more money than we would be able to be borrowed typically. What it allows us to do is in an emergency, take money and borrow it so that we can pay our bills.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cohen. Just a quick question. How often would you say that we as a state have applied emergency funding? Any data to substantiate your request here?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, to date, the state has never needed emergency funding, but that's the point of bills like this. You don't put on a parachute because you're expecting the plane to go down. You put on a parachute because if the plane does start to go down, you want to make sure that you don't go down with it. And so this bill gives us the flexibility, like most other states have, to be able to, in times of emergency, do things like make payroll, make sure individuals can keep showing up at DETR to take phone calls, make sure the DMV stays open, the National Guard gets paid. It is for emergencies. We do not have emergencies that often. That's a good thing, but we still want to be prepared for when we do.
Follow-up, Chair.
Follow-up, please.
So with that, we've never had this before, so why the $150 million?
Treasurer Conine, for the record. So what we looked at was historically where, if there was a problem, how big that problem was likely to be. And so what the 150 million represents is an amount that we believe at most would be necessary in order to get us through a temporary financial crisis until a long-term solution like a legislative session could be brought into play, right, where budget cuts could be made. Remember, right now, if the state doesn't have an ability to pay its bills, right, because say we have to shut down gaming in order to deal with a financial crisis, we don't have any way to borrow money. So most other states would get a temporary line of credit, a tax anticipation note, a revenue anticipation note. They would go borrow money temporarily in order to do things like make payroll. Nevada doesn't have the ability to do that. The only thing we can do is call everyone back into a special session immediately. And so most other states have a tool like this in order to make sure that the state doesn't have to liquidate long-term assets in order to pay short-term things. In other words, we can spend a little bit of money to borrow as opposed to losing millions of dollars of state assets by selling off long-term investments or by running a special session that would need to happen 72 hours after we called for the money.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair?
Follow-up, please.
Okay, with that said, will the IFC only get 15 days? Is that business days or consecutive days? How's that?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, I'd turn that over to the LCB legal folks. I'm not actually sure if it's business or days, but we know that when we've had to bring emergency measures before IFC during the pandemic and before for things like expanding the Pandemic Emergency Technical Support Grant Program, putting money into affordable housing, helping landlords get paid back for commercial rent, IFC has always been willing and able to move quickly in order to handle it. So that's where that timeline comes from.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And our legal counsel is not in the building for today, but I'm sure we'll get the question over to her and we'll have a response for the team by no later than tomorrow, I'm confident. Members, any additional questions? Assemblyman MacArthur, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. Debentures were mentioned a lot in this bill. Can you give me sort of a short definition of what a debenture is or an interim debenture?
Sure. So it's effectively a borrowing, right? So that means, Treasurer Conine, for the record. So that means it could be a revenue anticipation note, which is effectively borrowing on future revenues, be a tax anticipation note, which is effectively the same thing, but borrowing on future taxes. It could be a line of credit. It could be the issuance of warrants. It could be a lot of different things. And the goal of the Board of Finance, right, is to determine what the most effective and cheapest way to borrow funds is. And we could use different ones depending on what the scenario was. Interim debentures mean that they have a duration of less than 5 years, and that's defined by statute. And the separation there I'd make is that most state borrowing is a 20-year window. We borrow money and pay it back over 20 years. Interim debentures, by definition, are a shorter window because they're supposed to be used for purposes like this, for an interim purpose, as opposed to a long-term, say, capital planning purpose. You wouldn't use things like this to pay for a school, for instance.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up.
Follow-up, please.
Does that include something like bonds?
Yes, sir. So, Treasurer Conan, for the record, bonds in a broad sense are debentures, but we're talking about more specific types of things. So a revenue anticipation note, for instance, is a bond functionally. We are borrowing money, paying back a coupon or an interest rate on that borrowings for the maturity date, which is the amount of time between when we borrow and when we have to pay it back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? I don't believe we have any questions at this time. Thank you, Treasurer Conine. And at this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 47. Broadcast, if we could go to the telephone lines, please.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 47, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 47.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 47, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll invite those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Senate Bill 47.
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 47, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Treasurer Conine, any closing remarks you may have?
Thank you, Chair. 3 quick notes. 1, my staff is telling me it's 15 calendar days. I'm sure legal confirmed that. 2, on the interim debenture side, just wanted to direct people, the statute is NRS 349 spot 216. So that kind of outlines some of the different bonding we can do. And lastly, I'll just offer for anyone, last time around when we were all in person, we were able to do sort of a fun bonds 101. Well, it's fun for us. So if anyone would like that, we can certainly offer it in a one-on-one session. We'd love to take people through all the different ways the state borrows money to help create jobs and opportunity for Nevadans. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Treasurer. And at this time, we'll close out the hearing on Senate Bill 47. Members, I encourage you to continue to work with the Treasurer's office, and as other questions arise, that you give yourself an opportunity to work with them and do that fun 101 bond exercise that he mentioned so enthusiastically. So with that, we'll close out the hearing on Senate Bill 47. And next on our agenda, we have public comment broadcast. Please.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press star 9 now. Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close out public comment. Members, thank you all today. I know today was slightly different, and I appreciate everybody being ready, attentive, and kind of rolling with the flow of the meeting today, as it was obviously very different to anything we're accustomed to this session. For tomorrow, at this time, we don't have an intended meeting. As you know, we anticipate having very long floors for the next several days, so I encourage you to utilize this time to prepare, to review all those bills that we have for floor, and continue to work your bills. Make sure that they're in good footing and people are supporting them. always good to count your votes. But with that, please keep checking the agenda. We don't anticipate meeting Monday or Tuesday either. We may have to, or should we see an opening, but the intent as of now is not to meet Monday and Tuesday so that all the necessary time that we need on the floor can be utilized. And then we'll come back Wednesday and we'll hit the ground running and we start this exercise all over because a lot of bills are going to start coming over our way, as you've noticed. Thank you again, members. And one more time, big shout out and thank you to our staff for getting ready for today. You all did an amazing job. Y'all could give them a quick round of applause. Yeah, we have some amazing staff, and thank you for working with us in this hybrid model now, and you ran a perfectly smooth meeting. So thank you all, staff. This meeting's adjourned.